Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Death Note. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with Light Yagami being a model student in the eyes of the public, excelling in both academics and character. With a reclusive personality, he always felt that the people around him were mundane. The endless stream of violence and crime in the world only deepened his weariness of this boring and corrupt society. This all changed one day during class when he noticed a black notebook falling from the sky. The notebook was titled Death Note, and its function was as literal as its name. Anyone whose name was written inside would die. Light immediately assumed it was a new kind of prank from his school. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, he took it with him. Back home, he carefully studied the notebook's rules. The instructions stated that the writer must picture the person's face while writing their name, to avoid accidentally killing someone with the same name. If a cause of death was not specified, the target would die of a heart attack 40 seconds after their name was written. If a cause of death was specified, the writer had an additional 6 minutes and 40 seconds to add further details. These meticulous rules piqued Light's interest. He wanted to test the notebook's power, but was afraid that if someone truly died, he would bear the guilt of being a murderer. At that moment, a news report about a kidnapper was being broadcast live. Seeing the kidnapper's information displayed on screen, Light, half believing, wrote the man's name in the notebook. Seconds ticked by. After exactly 40 seconds, the broadcast reported that the kidnapper had indeed died of a heart attack. Light was instantly shocked and terrified. After calming down, he tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence. But what if it wasn't? Light felt it was necessary to conduct more experiments. During his experiments, Light's genius-level intellect became increasingly apparent. He first ruled out targeting criminals or high-profile figures, as information about their deaths might be suppressed for some time. His attention turned to the delinquents at his school. He reasoned that these individuals were worthless and would likely never change, even as adults. In a way, their deaths would be a service to the public. As he hesitated, he witnessed a group of bikers harassing a sexy woman, preparing to assault her. The leader of the group inadvertently revealed his name. Unsure of the exact characters for the name, Light wrote down all possible homonyms in the notebook. The next moment, the biker leader died in a motorcycle crash, exactly as specified. It was only then that Light truly believed he possessed a genuine death note. The blood on his hands did not plunge Light into fear. With the power of a god in his grasp, he felt a sense of purpose for the first time. In just a few days, he filled the notebook with numerous names until an unexpected visitor appeared. He introduced himself as Ryuk, a Death Reaper and the original owner of the Death Note. Light, quickly grasping the situation, calmly stated that he had been waiting for Ryuk's arrival. He wanted to know the price for using the Death Note. Was it his soul or something else? Ryuk almost laughed at the question, explaining that such dramatic ideas were merely human inventions. He wouldn't do anything to Light. From the moment Light picked up the notebook, he became its true owner and could use it as he pleased. If there was a price, it was that anyone who used the Death Note could go to neither heaven nor hell upon death. Instead, their name would be written in Ryuk's own notebook. Light then asked the most crucial question. Why was he chosen to be the notebook's owner? Ryuk, while voraciously eating an apple, casually replied that he had simply dropped it by accident, and Light happened to find it. He had dropped it because he was bored. The word boring resonated with Light. After killing the kidnapper and the biker, Light had questioned whether he had the right to judge others, but he concluded that this decaying world was waiting for a savior, and with the Death Note, he was that person. Others might be overcome by guilt and turn it in. Therefore, the only one who could save the world was someone like him, unburdened by conventional morality. And so he continued to write names in the notebook. He wanted criminals to know that a purveyor of justice was punishing them. However, Ryuk posed a sharp question. When that time came, Light himself might be the most evil person left in the world. After obtaining the Death Note, Light quickly established his goal: to execute criminals and become a god. To prevent the notebook from being stolen or discovered by his family, which would reveal Ryuk's existence, he built a special hidden compartment in his drawer. If opened incorrectly, it would trigger an electrical circuit, starting a fire that would destroy the evidence. Nevertheless, people began to notice this savior, and public opinion became sharply divided. Meanwhile, the large number of bizarre criminal deaths attracted the attention of Interpol, which convened an emergency meeting. Light's father, Soichiro, happened to be the police chief representing Japan. The police also enlisted the help of the world's greatest detective, L, to assist in the investigation. Under L's direction, police forces worldwide launched a joint operation, broadcasted globally. During the broadcast, a man claiming to be L appeared for the first time, unequivocally denouncing Kira, the public's name for the killer, as evil and vowing to bring him to justice. This successfully enraged Light, who was watching the broadcast. He saw himself as a god creating a utopia by saving the weak. To him, L's words were the ultimate insult. He immediately wrote L's name in the notebook. 40 seconds later, L died of a heart attack. But before Light could celebrate, the screen changed. The real L's voice came on, revealing that the man on screen was just an anonymous death row inmate. The test had successfully proven that Kira could kill from a distance, but had failed to kill the real L, whose name and face remained hidden. L, feeling this humiliation wasn't enough, dropped another bombshell. The global broadcast was not simultaneous, but had been aired in different regions at different times. He had also noticed a detail the police had overlooked. The first victim, the kidnapper, was only reported on in Japan. Therefore, the police had already confirmed that Kira was located in the Kanto region. After finding and verifying the Death Note's power, Light had begun his plan to create a new world, with himself as its god, punishing evil in his name to reduce crime rates. Because of this, his actions caught the attention of the world's greatest detective, L, who managed to narrow down his general location. A battle of wits began between them from afar. Having determined Kira's area of activity, the police noticed a pattern in the criminal's deaths. On weekdays, they were concentrated between 5 p.m. and 2 a.m., while on weekends and holidays, the times were more scattered. L deduced from this that Kira was likely a student. This wasn't an oversight on Light's part. Besides being a savior, he still had to maintain his role as a model student. One police officer noted that since Kira's appearance, violent crime in Japan had significantly decreased. This unspoken truth was a slap in the face to everyone in the room. L broke the awkward silence and proposed a new line of investigation. He wanted to know if the criminals' faces were shown in Japanese news reports. After assigning tasks, Chief Soichiro finally had a chance to go home and rest, unaware that his presence was Kira's greatest asset in dealing with the police. Light covertly accessed his father's computer, learning about some of the police's findings. The Death Note had another feature besides causing a heart attack in 40 seconds. A specific cause of death could be detailed within 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Light decided to use this feature to clear his name of suspicion. 3 days later, the investigation headquarters was in chaos. Over 2 consecutive non-holidays, 46 new victims had appeared. But this time, the deaths occurred at a regular interval of 1 victim per hour. The theory that Kira was a student was seemingly debunked, but L quickly responded, realizing that Kira was sending a message and challenging him. Kira could not only control the time of death, but also had access to police intelligence. Furthermore, Light used this opportunity to sow seeds of doubt between L and the police. Now all he had to do was wait for the police to help him uncover L's true identity. As expected, some police officers began to resent L's suspicions and resigned. Investigating Kira was already extremely dangerous, and they didn't have the same anonymity as the great detective. Police relied on their badges for credibility, and now with a potential mole, they could be killed by Kira at any moment. No one could ignore the risk to their own life. The great detective was, of course, L. He held a list of 141 police personnel, and the mounting evidence convinced him that Kira was among them or their families. He tasked the FBI with investigating them, and Light and his father were no exception. On his way home late one night, Ryuk seemed hesitant and wanted to say something. Although Light's actions had provided him with entertainment, Ryuk clarified that he was neither an ally nor an enemy and would not interfere. He then mentioned that someone had been following them for 2 days. This startled Light. Without Ryuk's warning, he would have remained oblivious. He quickly composed himself, understanding it must be someone sent by L. Although his actions had been normal, prolonged surveillance could expose him. But without knowing the follower's name, he couldn't eliminate them. As if reading his mind, Ryuk asked Light why the Death Reaper write names in their notebooks. He explained that by doing so, the Death Reaper gains the remaining lifespan of that human. If a person destined to live to 60 is killed by a Death Reaper at 40, those remaining 20 years are added to the Death Reaper's life. This is why, unless a Death Reaper dies of laziness, they cannot be killed by physical means. However, as a human, Light could not gain lifespan this way. Furthermore, the Death Reaper could see a human's name and remaining lifespan just by looking at their face. For instance, he could see Light's lifespan clearly but wouldn't tell him. This was the crucial difference between a Death Reaper and a notebook holder. However, a notebook holder could trade half of their remaining lifespan for a pair of Death Reaper eyes, which would grant them the same ability. Intelligent people are often proud, and Light was no exception. Everything he did was to become the god of a new world. If he died halfway through from a shortened lifespan, what would be the point? Besides, accepting the Death Reaper eyes would make his journey to godhood far less interesting. Ryuk added that this trade could be made at any time as long as Light possessed the notebook. Light was not pleased with this explanation. If such a rule existed, Ryuk should have written it in the notebook from the start. Light asked if there was anything else to add. Ryuk sheepishly replied that there probably wasn't. Light joked that it was a shame. He might have considered it if the trade was for a pair of wings. But it was just a joke. With eyes and wings, he might truly become a Death Reaper one day. Ryuk quietly remarked that Light was already an excellent Death Reaper. The Death Reaper realm was in decline, with the remaining Death Reaper being little more than zombies, taking human lives just to prolong their own existence. They had forgotten their purpose. Compared to them, Light, who fought for humanity, seemed more like a true Death Reaper. Light dismissed this, stating he had no desire to be compared to a Death Reaper. However, he did suggest that Ryuk could use his experiences in the human world to change the stagnant Death Reaper realm. As Light held the notebook and spoke, an idea struck him. He had thought of a way to use the notebook's rules to learn the follower's name. Soon after, 6 criminals died of heart attacks, but this time was different. 3 of them performed strange actions before dying. The first drew a symbol in his cell with his own blood. The second left a suicide note mentioning Kira. The third, most bizarrely, escaped his cell only to die in a guard's toilet 30 meters away. L soon received this information. While he couldn't rule out that the criminals acted on their own, he connected it to Kira's ability to control the time of death, reasoning that controlling pre-mortem actions was also possible. He immediately contacted Soichiro, instructing him not to release any details to the media beyond the heart attacks. He suspected this was an experiment by Kira and didn't want to reveal what he knew, but Light had already learned of the results through his father's computer. After writing the names, he had specified 2 types of pre-mortem actions. 3 plausible actions were carried out flawlessly, while 3 impossible ones failed, such as having a prisoner in Japan die in France or draw a picture of L, whom they'd never seen. The last failure was a minor disappointment. He had instructed a criminal to write, "I know L is suspecting the police," which also failed. This confirmed that a target could not write information beyond their own knowledge. Though the limitations were significant, Light was confident these pre-mortem actions would keep L busy for a while. Now, for the main event. Light selected a wanted drug addict and wrote his fate in the notebook. After setting things in motion, Light decided to take a break, calling up an admiring female classmate with a single phone call. Not long after, the drug addict boarded and hijacked the bus they were on. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Light pretended to pass a note to his classmate, suggesting they work together to subdue the hijacker. A man in the back seat leaned forward and told them to leave it to him. Light, however, wouldn't trust a stranger so easily, suspecting he could be an accomplice. The man hesitated. He was the agent who had been following Light. Several days of observation had already led him to rule Light out as a suspect. Besides, if Light were Kira, the hijacker should have already died of a heart attack. He had also read about the hijacker in the news and knew how dangerous an addict could be. After a moment of rapid deliberation, the man revealed his FBI identification. Just like that, Light learned his tail's name was Ray. But the real show was just beginning. Light accidentally dropped the note in the aisle, catching the hijacker's attention. It was just a simple love note, but after reading it, the hijacker suddenly turned and began firing wildly. Light had even factored Ryuk into his plan. The note was written on a scrap from the Death Note, allowing the hijacker to see the grotesque Death Reaper. Seeing that bullets had no effect on Ryuk, the hijacker stopped the bus and fled for his shitty life. The moment he stepped off, he was fatally struck by a car, just as the notebook had decreed. The oblivious agent thought the hijacker was high and hallucinating, watching him die without a shred of suspicion towards Light, the true perpetrator. Due to his sensitive status, an FBI agent operating secretly in Japan was a diplomatic issue, Ray asked Light not to reveal his identity to the police before leaving, saying it would be handled as a traffic accident. This was exactly what Light wanted. Without a witness, no one would ever know he was there. When a weary Ray returned home, his fiancée immediately prepared coffee for him. After hearing about his experience, her instincts as a former agent kicked in, and she asked if he was sure it was just an accident. Ray cut her off, saying the matter was closed. He was more concerned about how to face his future father-in-law. Meanwhile, Light didn't act immediately after learning Ray's name. An agent dying right after completing a mission would raise suspicion. Instead, he continued to randomly select criminals from prison to keep Elle occupied. On his end, Elle was indeed misled. But after carefully examining the suicide note, he discovered the message Kira was sending. He immediately told his trusted associate to monitor the prisons, predicting more such messages would appear. A week later, Light put his plan to eliminate Ray into motion. Through recent tests, he had discovered a hidden rule even Ryuk didn't know. The death note would still work if the cause of death and pre-mortem actions were written first, with the name filled in later. He would use this rule. Seeing his target, Light put on a hood, followed him, and revealed his identity as Kira. To prove it, Light said he would kill a waiter outside a cafe. As Ray was about to shout a warning, the man collapsed, clutching his chest. This man had committed several rapes, but had escaped justice due to insufficient evidence. Now, he had not escaped divine punishment. Light told Ray that he probably knew Kira needed a name and face to kill, but then exploited Ray's lack of knowledge about the other trigger conditions to hold everyone present hostage. Ray froze. Feeling the threat wasn't enough, Light even brought up Ray's family. Desperate to protect his fiancée, Ray inadvertently revealed her name, falling right into Light's trap. Light pressed his advantage, claiming he now knew her face as well. Ray, though he might not care about innocent bystanders, could not forsake his loved one. He completely gave up resistance. Light then gave him a radio and several sheets of paper with small boxes cut out, instructing him to board a subway train. First, he asked how many FBI agents were in Japan. Ray answered 12. Light then instructed Ray to write his superior's name in the top box, saying the superior would soon send him a file with all the agent's information. Shortly after he wrote the name, he received the file. Light told Ray to place the file on the luggage rack and get off at a specific station in half an hour. The moment Ray stepped off the train, he collapsed, clutching his chest in agony before his death. The papers were actually an envelope containing a sheet torn from the death note. The top box had instructions for the superior to send the file to all agents. The other boxes specified that after receiving the file, the recipient would die of a heart attack. Since the file was sent to all agents, Light was confident no one could trace it back to him. But the plan wasn't flawless. Upon learning of the tragedy, Ray's fiancée Naomi began her own investigation. Her instincts as a former agent told her the accident Ray had mentioned was no accident at all. She went to the bus company and found the driver from that day. The driver remembered the incident clearly because only Ray had stepped up and told everyone to get down. He had no memory of the other 6 passengers. After thanking the driver, Naomi made a bold deduction. Kira must have been one of those passengers. This meant Kira likely lived along that bus route. Soon, Elle received news from the U.S. The deaths of so many agents led the American government to terminate the investigation. When the Japanese police learned that Elle had been investigating them, their trust in him wavered even more. With the FBI agents all killed by Kira, the investigators feared for their own shitty lives, and more decided to leave the task force. Elle was also filled with regret for being outplayed. That night, Light's father held a meeting. A worried Soichiro told his family to prepare themselves. The FBI deaths proved Kira would kill those who investigated him. But as police chief, Soichiro could not bow to evil. He would fight to the end. His only concern was his family. After a brief silence, Light stood up and said he was proud of his father, and if anything happened to him, he would personally see Kira brought to the executioner's block. With his family's support, Soichiro called an emergency meeting. He told those who wanted to leave that they could do so without penalty. When he returned at 5 p.m., only 5 comrades remained, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. Just then, Elle's voice came through. He expressed his trust in these police officers with their strong sense of justice. To show his determination to catch Kira, Elle offered to meet with the 6 of them in person. But first, they had to decide if they trusted him. The 6 men went outside to discuss loudly. One was strongly against it, arguing that Elle was only choosing to reveal himself now, which was uncharacteristic of his solitary nature. It could be another stand-in. He preferred that the police conduct their own investigation. Soichiro, however, finally showed some insight. He speculated that Elle had been waiting for this exact situation. From the beginning, there was distrust within the task force, and later intelligence leaks made L's command difficult. Now, with only the most dedicated members left, it was easier for him to lead. Soichiro was right, but the dissenting officer couldn't agree and chose to leave. In the end, only 5 remained. Soon after, Soichiro opened the door to a hotel room, and the mysterious L revealed his face for the first time. L was confident that if Kira learned of this, he would try to get close, a situation L welcomed. But this applied to L as well. Both were brilliant, but L was confident, not arrogant. This was the difference between him and Light. He explained that Kira's competitive nature was evident from their first encounter. When provoked, Kira always responded with greater force. After being labeled as evil, Kira, who had previously only targeted criminals, unhesitatingly killed L's double. As for why they didn't just stop reporting on criminals, it was because doing so might cause Kira to target people with minor offenses, or even ordinary citizens, using the police's hiding of criminals as an excuse. Although their clashes seemed to end in L's defeat, the fragmented information he had gathered had given him a rough target. 5 days after the FBI arrived in Japan, the bizarre pre-mortem behaviors appeared in prisons. This was clearly an experiment by Kira, suggesting that within those 5 days, Kira had become aware of the FBI's threat. To eliminate the FBI agents whose names and faces he didn't know, he must have conducted more detailed tests. During this period, 23 people died of heart attacks, some with minor crimes. Therefore, Kira must have been one of the FBI's targets in those first 5 days. L had already prepared the FBI's investigation reports from that period. The young officers' confidence in catching Kira grew, along with their admiration for L. But Soichiro asked if L was admitting defeat in their rivalry by revealing his face to catch Kira. L calmly acknowledged his loss, but firmly believed he would win in the end. After talking with the officers and ruling them out as Kira, L made a call. An elderly man with white hair entered. He was the one who had acted as L's proxy. He provided everyone with new identification and a special belt that, when pressed twice, would immediately contact him. After the meeting, L stared out the window. He had stabilized the situation. Now he just needed one decisive piece of evidence to checkmate Kira. Light, too, was wondering if he had missed anything. Besides the drug addict who died in the car crash, he felt his actions were flawless. Unbeknownst to him, someone was already focused on that single flaw. Rei's fiancée, Naomi, through her own investigation, had confirmed that Kira was on the bus and deduced that Kira could kill by means other than a heart attack. She went to the police station to request help from the investigation headquarters, but the 5 members were still with L. Light, who was there to deliver clothes to his father, happened to run into her. Learning of her troubles, Light kindly offered to introduce her to his father, the police chief. After exchanging names, Light, to gain her trust, mentioned that Kira could control pre-mortem actions. Naomi had already discovered this through her investigation and shared her theory that Kira could kill by means other than heart attacks. Their conversation revealed the full story. Naomi explained how Rei had gotten involved in the bus hijacking. Rei had told her that he had shown his ID to someone on the bus, the only time he had done so since arriving in Japan. That's why she was so sure Kira was on the bus, and that the hijacker was also killed by Kira, all to get the FBI's information from Rei. Light took out a pen and paper, asking for details of her investigation and pretending to take notes. In reality, he was writing the details of her death. However, when the time came, nothing happened to Naomi. Light's face darkened as he noticed Ryuk's strange, continuous smile. He instantly realized Naomi had used a fake name. Her fiancé had died because he revealed his name. It was only natural for her to be cautious. The situation was now dire. Just then, Naomi said she wanted to go back to the station to see if the task force members had returned. About to be exposed, even the self-proclaimed god began to panic. He repeatedly told himself to calm down. He just needed to find her name, and he could do it. Light first abandoned the idea of using force. Luckily, while Naomi was a woman, she was ex-FBI and could likely handle herself. As Light pondered other methods, Naomi sensed something was off. She asked why he was still following her sexy body, saying she could go to the station alone. Light could only watch as she walked away. It would take about 5 minutes to reach the station. Light decided he had 5 minutes to get her name. He hurried after her, calling her name, and told her she wouldn't be able to contact the task force. He explained the headquarters was empty because they had implemented security measures to protect the investigators' identities. Otherwise, they would suffer the same fate as the FBI. Light hadn't figured out how to get her name yet, but he couldn't let himself be cornered. He continued, saying the headquarters was now cut off from the outside, so she couldn't possibly contact them. But Naomi asked a sharp question. How did he know all this? Light feigned hesitation and then claimed to be a member of the task force himself. Naomi was stunned. Without giving her time to think, Light explained that L was leading the investigation, but many had left out of fear. He himself, due to his past experience helping the police solve cases, had been recruited by L as an investigator. Although Naomi was slightly suspicious, she conceded that everything he said made sense. Still, she insisted on going to the station to confirm. But Light couldn't let her go. He anxiously followed, but Naomi said her best chance was to contact L directly, and L had a reason to see her. 2 years ago, she had solved a case under L's command. Though their interaction was brief, Naomi was certain that even if the police and the task force were untrustworthy, L could be trusted. Light inwardly rejoiced. This was the opportunity he was waiting for. After a series of subtle flatteries that lowered Naomi's guard, he asked the question everyone would wonder. Why did she tell him, a complete stranger, all of this? She explained that she was desperate when she couldn't meet with the task force. The appearance of the chief's son, who validated her investigation, was a relief. Most importantly, she felt he was very similar to L. Hearing this, Light knew he had her. He turned, extended his hand, and asked if she wanted to become a member of the task force. As expected, Naomi took the bait, saying her only goal was to catch Kira. She wanted nothing else. Seeing her eagerness to join, Light said he needed to see her identification. She admitted to using a fake name and produced her driver's license. The name on it was Naomi. Light took out his paper again, pretending to take notes as he asked questions. Snow began to fall. An officer from the task force, hurrying back with an umbrella, brushed past them. But fate did not favor Naomi. The officer's view was obscured by the umbrella, and he didn't notice them. Moments later, Light finished writing, sealing Naomi's tragic fate. The scene shifts to Light's daily routine involving placing a scrap of paper in his door jamb and setting the handle 5 millimeters lower than usual. For extra security, he would also place a mechanical pencil lead in the gap. One day, returning from school, Light found the handle reset and the pencil lead broken, but the paper scrap, meant as a decoy, had been deliberately put back. This means that someone had been in his room. Not long before, L had a breakthrough after days of continuous work. By reviewing surveillance footage of the FBI agents before their deaths, he found a discrepancy. On the day of his death, Agent Ray spent an extra 30 minutes on the subway compared to his usual commute. The file folder he was holding before entering the station was gone when he got off, and he kept looking into the train car before he died. Although Kira had always killed remotely, if L thought in reverse, the person on that subway could very well be Kira. Just then, L received a report from a concerned citizen about the disappearance of Ray's fiancée, Naomi. The officer, Matsuda, guessed she had committed suicide out of grief, but L, having worked with Naomi, knew she was a strong woman. With her fiancé murdered, she was more likely to investigate Kira. Being so close to Ray, she would know things the police didn't. Her disappearance was most likely related to Kira. L immediately decided to focus on Ray's investigation targets and ordered surveillance cameras and listening devices to be placed in their homes, including Chief Soichiro's. When asked about the probability of Kira being among them, L replied only 5%. While objectively it was 5%, in L's mind, there were no other possibilities left. Now, he just needed evidence. Matsuda found it hard to believe they would go to such lengths for a mere 5% chance, especially considering there were female family members in the chief's home. Soichiro interrupted. Though furious that his family was under suspicion, he acknowledged that after so long, they had gotten nowhere. Now even a 1% chance had to be pursued. He insisted that if they were to install cameras, the bathroom should not be exempt. L agreed, stating he would personally monitor Light's family. Unbeknownst to them, Light had already discovered the surveillance. He calmly entered his room, ignoring Ryuk, and even placed the paper scrap back in the door before leaving. In front of the monitor, Soichiro was tense. His son's behavior clearly indicated he was hiding something. But L remarked that it was normal for a 17-year-old boy. He had done similar things himself. After confirming there were no listening devices on his clothes, Light explained the situation to Ryuk. After buying some study materials, Light once again manipulated Ryuk. He told Ryuk not to speak to him in the room anymore and to stop eating apples there. If he ate them, it would look like a paranormal event and expose Light, as he had made it public that the Death Reaper eats apples. But apples were like an addiction for Ryuk. He felt unwell if he went a day without them. Light said he could eat them if he could find a blind spot in the cameras. Ryuk was thoroughly outplayed this time, as there were 64 cameras in Light's room, leaving no blind spots. Late at night, Light was diligently studying, but Soichiro, watching the monitor, was shocked to see his well-dressed son looking at adult magazines. L, however, commented that this too was normal for a curious 17-year-old. The paper in the door could also be explained. The real challenge was what would happen if a criminal's information was broadcast, but they didn't die. Light would surely be suspected. But Light was prepared. He had pre-written the names of criminals for the next few weeks in a small notebook to cover for times he might be sick or unable to write. While an ordinary person might slip up under surveillance, he was no ordinary person. Light had hidden a miniature TV inside a bag of potato chips. He used it to see the criminals' faces and write their names. This move provided him with a perfect alibi in front of L. Light had apparently cleared himself of suspicion. However, being cleared on the very first day was an even bigger point of suspicion for L. Moreover, Kira had even killed criminals with minor offenses that day. L was thinking on another level, but Light was a level above him. He openly turned on the TV and wrote down the names of all the criminals reported. He then left the house empty-handed and used a scrap of the notebook hidden in his wallet to write down the names later, perfectly clearing his name. L, watching the surveillance, could find no flaws. He even began to wonder if Kira could kill with just his thoughts. But even so, a normal person's demeanor would change when killing. If Kira was one of these people, his mental state must have reached a godlike level. But what god needs a name and a face to kill? Therefore, he couldn't be a god. He was just a murderer wielding power, playing God. The surveillance had become pointless. The best way forward was to make him confess he was Kira. With the cameras removed, Light breathed a sigh of relief. Now he just needed to use his father's inside information to slowly investigate and eliminate his great rival, L. Ryuk could finally eat apples openly again. The lack of apples had caused him severe withdrawal symptoms. When he finally got some while they were out, Light made him eat the core as well. Over time, the manipulated Ryuk was adopted and developed the habit of eating apple cores, a rumor that even spread to the Death Reaper realm. In the following days, Light enjoyed a brief period of normal student life, enrolling in Tokyo University with a perfect score and serving as the freshman representative. However, another student with a perfect score and strange mannerisms also served as a representative. To Light's surprise, L appeared before him openly. A normal person might have had a heart attack, but Light's reaction was remarkably natural. He claimed to be a huge fan of L and was thrilled to meet him. Internally, Light's mind was racing, dismissing several response strategies in seconds. If this was really L, he couldn't kill him. If L died now, suspicion would fall on him. Moreover, the name L was the same as an idol's, undoubtedly a fake. This was L's cleverest move. During the surveillance, he had noticed Light talking to his sister about this idol. If Light tried to kill him with that name, he would instinctively picture the idol's face, and she would die instead, which would still cast suspicion on Light. L's brazen appearance was a signal. L suspected him, but Light didn't know how much he suspected and what evidence he had. For now, the best course of action was to think of nothing. L was surely observing him for any signs of wavering. Light quickly cut off his internal debate and casually said goodbye to L. But the moment he got home, he couldn't hold it together. He even began to complain why the death note couldn't be used to manipulate someone into killing another person. It showed just how thoroughly he had been outplayed. Even if he could learn L's real name, he couldn't kill him now without the police suspecting him. Light had to admit he had underestimated L. L's direct approach put him in an invincible position from the start. He anticipated that L would try to get closer to him, which also meant L had no concrete evidence. On the surface, they had to pretend to be friendly classmates, while secretly probing each other's identities. It was a battle of wits. The next day, L invited Light for a game of tennis. Light mentioned he had been a national champion in junior high, practically a prince of tennis. But L wasn't intimidated, having won the British Junior Championship himself. What appeared to be a friendly match was, in reality, a high-stakes psychological game. Even Ryuk was startled by the intensity. This was just a prelude. L's true intention was to test Light through tennis. Since Kira was competitive, if Light was determined to win, he would seem like Kira. But if he deliberately lost, it would look like he was afraid of being seen as Kira, a sign of guilt. The seemingly normal tennis match was a multi-layered battle of wits. Each betting the other's strategy was not as deep as their own. The match wasn't about friendship. It was a ritual for them to acknowledge their relationship. Light believed L would try to get even closer, attempting to trick him into revealing information only Kira would know. Light, in turn, would demand to know about L's investigation. To gain Light's trust, and for Light to find L's true name, both thought of going to the investigation headquarters. The match ended with Light's victory, but L quickly regained the upper hand afterward. L bluntly stated that he suspected Light was Kira, though the probability was only 1%. But if Light could prove his innocence and pass a test, he would be allowed to join the investigation. This move forced Light to react to L's pace. L presented 3 photos of the death messages left by criminals under Kira's control. Light was familiar with them, but if he solved the code, his suspicion level would rise. However, even if he did, it would only prove his high intelligence. Light perfectly deciphered the code based on the sequence, but L said he was wrong because there were actually 4 photos. Light immediately knew the 4th was fake. He retorted that based on the first 3, his deduction was perfect. L replied that Light had assumed there were only 3 photos, implying a question. Why was Light so certain there were only 3? Light realized the test wasn't about his reasoning ability, but his reaction. L continued, asking how Light would determine if someone was Kira. Light answered that he would make the target reveal something only Kira would know, just as L was doing now. L acknowledged Light's reasoning skills, but became even more suspicious. Still, L wanted to recruit Light to help with the investigation. Light didn't agree immediately, stating he was merely interested in Kira and didn't want to risk his life. He also expressed doubts about whether the L before him was real, demanding proof. This was Light's counterattack, but it also confirmed his competitive nature in L's eyes, increasing L's suspicion. However, L agreed to prove his identity by letting Light meet the investigation team. Both their phones rang simultaneously. Soichiro had suffered a heart attack, though it was just from exhaustion. At the hospital, Soichiro confirmed L's identity to Light. This was a piece of good news for Light, who immediately thought of killing L but knew he had to be patient. For now, he had to play the part of the concerned son. Light said he would assist the investigation once his father recovered, but Soichiro strongly objected, not wanting his son in danger. However, Soichiro, a man of strong principles, said that while he had always defined Kira as evil, he was beginning to think the power to kill itself was the true evil. Happiness obtained through killing could never be true happiness. He felt that the person who possessed such power was unfortunate, but to Light, this power was never a misfortune. It was a tool to create his utopia. Meanwhile, a TV station received a videotape containing a message from Kira to the world. If they didn't broadcast it, he would kill everyone at the station. Sakura TV announced to its viewers that they were being coerced by Kira to broadcast his tapes. There were 4 tapes in total. The first 2 proved the sender's identity as Kira by accurately predicting the deaths of several criminals, including a host who was criticizing Kira live on air. Then came Kira's declaration, demanding the police stop their investigation and for online critics to back off. L immediately recognized the danger and ordered someone to stop the broadcast, but the station, chasing ratings, deliberately ignored the calls. An officer rushed to the station, but the doors were locked. As he prepared to force his way in, he was targeted by someone with binoculars. Shortly after, the officer collapsed from a heart attack. His colleague, Aizawa, was about to rush to the scene but was stopped by L, who calmly analyzed the situation. They had previously thought Kira needed a name and a face, but this Kira seemed to be able to kill with just a face. As they felt helpless, a police van sped towards the station and crashed through the gates. It was Soichiro who managed to stop the broadcast before the 4th tape aired and retrieved the tapes. With Kira's accomplice watching outside, L contacted the deputy police chief. Due to fear and public pressure, the deputy chief finally agreed to send support. L directed the police while calming Soichiro. Later, L watched all the tapes. Kira demanded that high-ranking police officials and L appear on a live broadcast, that news reports increase criminals' exposure, and that he would be the final judge. The police would never agree to such terms. Light, watching the broadcast, was delighted. he realized there was another notebook holder, a fervent fan of his who had also made the trade for the Death Reaper eyes. All he had to do now was wait for L's death. On the other hand, he felt this imposter Kira might expose the Death Note's existence. Weighing the pros and cons, Light decided to join the investigation headquarters to keep track of L and the imposter. Events unfolded as he predicted. World leaders were privately deciding to hand over L. L had also anticipated this. Being killed by an imposter, Kira was particularly annoying to him. He had already sensed this wasn't the original Kira, who only targeted those pursuing him. This new Kira harmed the innocent and only killed criminals featured in women's or gossip magazines. L extended an olive branch to Light, though this didn't mean Light was cleared of suspicion. L simply needed his reasoning skills. This suited Light perfectly, as it gave him legitimate access to the investigation headquarters. After seeing the remaining tapes, Light was certain the imposter was not on his level. But if he could tolerate it, and this person took care of L for him, it wouldn't be a bad thing. However, if he acted on this, L would surely become more suspicious. So when L approached him, Light had to point out the existence of a second Kira, with his reasoning process mirroring L's. To prevent the original Kira from contacting the second one first, L decided to have his team impersonate the first Kira and send a message. This was the real reason L had invited Light. He wanted Light to play the role of Kira. When it came to acting, Light was second to none. With the advantage of playing himself, he quickly wrote a speech as Kira. The next day, a broadcast aired Kira's voice, denying the second Kira's identity and telling her to carefully consider his true intentions. As expected, Sakura TV received a reply from the second Kira. She stated that she would obey Kira's command and would not continue to target L. Light was almost furious upon hearing this. The second Kira then said she wanted to meet the original Kira. Although Kira didn't have the eyes, she promised not to harm him and suggested they confirm each other's Death Reaper. L was even more shocked than Light, stunned by the revelation that the Death Reaper actually existed. The scene shifts to Gellus, a Death Reaper who could barely speak, but he had fallen in love with a human girl. On the day the innocent girl was fated to die, just as she was about to be killed by a creepy stalker, Gellus frantically wrote the attacker's name in his notebook. However, using the Death Note to help a human is a Death Reaper taboo, and he turned to dust. Another Death Reaper, Rem, who pitied him, took his notebook to the girl, along with Gellus's remaining lifespan. That girl was Misa. Ironically, upon learning all this, Misa merely commented on the tragic beauty of the love story. However, she was happy to have another piece of information to impress Kira with. Misa didn't give up on meeting Kira. She sent a diary to the TV station, filled with various times and locations. Light immediately noticed the word note, realizing she was suggesting they meet in Aoyama. L, unaware of the diary's significance, set up surveillance at all locations. To prevent the second Kira from being caught, Light insisted on accompanying the investigation team. Afterward, L privately instructed Matsuda to keep a close eye on Light. Later, Light discovered an online ad for a club in Aoyama called Note Blue, hosting an event on the specified day. He realized his opponent wasn't as simple-minded as he thought. As a precaution, Light arranged to go to Aoyama with a group of friends that day to appear natural and prevent the other party from identifying him via Ryuk. But he underestimated Misa. She had disguised herself and was waiting in a coffee shop along the route, using her Death Reaper eyes to scan the names of passers-by. She naturally spotted Light in the crowd. However, she didn't approach him. Instead, she went home and researched him. She found out his address and discovered he was not only handsome, but also brilliant. The perfect boyfriend. The investigation team came up empty-handed. Even Light, with all his cleverness, was still in the dark. But they soon received a message from the second Kira, thanking the police for their help, which had enabled her to find the original Kira. Light was even more confused as he hadn't noticed anything unusual that day. Based on the timing of the message, L deduced that the meeting had happened in Aoyama, deepening his suspicion of Light. However, based on the second Kira's wording, L concluded they hadn't formally met yet. With this assumption, L decided to try and persuade the second Kira to turn herself in. The police issued a statement, even suggesting that the second Kira would be killed upon meeting the original Kira and that she should reveal his identity to them in exchange for a reduced sentence. What L didn't know was that a clever person is often helpless against a simple one. Misa's actions were bafflingly direct. She went straight to Light's house, using the excuse of returning a notebook for their first meeting. After confirming their identities, Light took her to his room. Misa explained the effects of the Death Reaper eyes, and Light finally understood how he had been exposed. Misa said it was fine if Light didn't trade for the eyes, as she could be his eyes, on the condition that he accept her as his girlfriend. Light was only concerned that this simple-minded girl would get caught by the police and leak information. Misa promised to follow his orders and even proved her competence with disguises. If necessary, she would even kill the friend who had delivered the tapes for her, at Light's command. Seeing that this wasn't enough to earn his trust, Misa handed her notebook to Light. Still, Light remained unmoved, as he didn't know if she had hidden some pages. He asked why she was willing to go to such lengths. It turned out that Misa's parents had been murdered a year ago, and the killer had escaped severe punishment. It was Kira who had finally brought them justice. At this, Light finally let down his guard. He was perhaps the most manipulative man you've ever seen. The moment their relationship was confirmed, he was already planning how to kill her. Light not only openly used Misa as a tool, but also demanded she allow him to date other women simultaneously, all to reduce her prominence. But Misa was a unique character herself. She declared that if Light dared to date anyone else, she would dare to kill them. It was truly a case of attracting like. For the first time, Light found women to be so troublesome. He tried to threaten her life to make her back down, but before Misa could say anything, her Death Reaper Rem spoke first, warning that if anything happened to Misa, she would kill Light. So not only could he not kill Misa, he now had to protect her from the police. To make matters worse, Light later found out online that Misa was a moderately famous idol in training, which would draw even more attention to them. Light lamented that women would only slow down his ascent to godhood, but for now, the priority was to use Misa's Death Reaper eyes to eliminate El. A few days later, Misa released a final statement. She thanked the police for their advice and said she would no longer act as Kira, but would continue to assist him and would share this power with others to change the world. El immediately deduced that the two had made contact. Firstly, the second Kira's way of thinking had changed, and secondly, her desperate desire to meet Kira was gone. Misa's intelligence was not high enough to come up with such a statement. Light had intended to use this message to distract the task force, but it backfired. He had to admit his carelessness. El continued, saying that while the two Kira's meeting was a major threat, it also reduced the likelihood of Light being Kira. If Light were Kira, he would likely have instructed the second Kira to continue pressuring El to appear on TV so she could kill him. Hearing this, Light coolly replied that if he were Kira, he wouldn't do that, because he knew El would have other countermeasures. Soichiro became angry at this, telling Light not to say things like, "if I were Kira" anymore. But Light argued he was just trying to solve the case quickly, and precisely because he wasn't Kira, he could say such things. Light spoke with great sincerity, but immediately turned to thinking about how to eliminate El. He was all smiles on the outside, but plotting on the inside. El's ability to deduce their meeting from just a few words meant that future meetings with Misa would be even riskier. Just as he was thinking this, Misa appeared and jumped on his back. For the sake of his grand plan, Light endured it. He even considered asking Rem to kill El, reasoning that El would bring misfortune to Misa. After concluding that the two Kiras had met, El anticipated that Kira would try to kill him soon. He gathered everyone and gave them his final instructions, stating that if he died, Light was definitely Kira. Though he couldn't think clearly under the threat of death, based on all the previous evidence, there were no other suspects besides Light. He had to lock onto Light as Kira. And just as El predicted, Light had decided to have Rem kill El. It was a huge gamble. If El died tomorrow, the path ahead would be clear. The two stood as if on a high platform, engaged in their final strategic battle. By tomorrow, only one would remain. The next day, however, they unexpectedly met on campus. El directly told Light everything he had told the police. Light was momentarily shaken. As he hesitated whether to proceed, Misa suddenly appeared behind them. The next moment, El acted like a crazed fan, declaring he was a fan of Misa's. After her manager dragged her sexy body away, Light finally breathed a sigh of relief. All he had to do was call Misa and ask for El's real name. He dialed her number, but the phone rang from behind him, indicating that El had her phone. The outcome was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. Luckily, Misa had a backup phone. He could still win by calling again. But just then, El's phone rang. It was the task force, reporting that Misa had been officially arrested as a suspect for being the second Kira. Even though Light had been trying to maintain his manipulative persona, their recent encounter had allowed El to confirm Misa's identity. A search of her room uncovered evidence like hair fibers that matched those sent with the videotapes. Light finally realized he had lost this round. The reason Elle appeared before him today was not only because he was sure Light wouldn't dare act directly, but also because he had successfully noticed Misa's suspicious behavior. Misa did not reveal any information. Rem had considered helping Misa escape, but was refused. Doing so would be an admission of her special abilities and would bring trouble to Light. Rem could only suggest that Misa relinquish ownership of the notebook, which would erase all her memories related to it, though her love for Light would remain. Misa finally agreed. After giving up the notebook, her personality changed drastically. She thought she had been kidnapped by a stalker and furiously cursed at Elle, calling him a pervert. This left Elle bewildered. Based on previous evidence and Misa's resigned attitude upon capture, her identity as the second Kira was all but confirmed. But now she was speaking nonsense. He could only assume she was feigning ignorance. As he was at a loss, Light arrived at the investigation headquarters and turned himself in. But he only confessed halfway. With a feigned innocence, he said that if the world's greatest detective said he was Kira, then he must be Kira. As a target of Rei's investigation, a participant in the Aoyama incident, and Misa's boyfriend, all evidence pointed to him as the most likely suspect. Even he would reach that conclusion. However, Light argued that his naturally kind disposition meant he couldn't have done such things. He speculated that he might have become a crazed killer unconsciously or in his sleep. But Elle immediately refuted this, revealing that they had installed cameras in Light's room, during which he had shown no abnormal behavior. The other officers, however, were already fooled by Light's acting. They argued that the surveillance wasn't 24/7 and Light could have become Kira while he was out. Elle realized Light was trying to clear his name through confinement. Since Light wanted to play this game, Elle decided to go along with it and suggested giving him a life sentence for now. But this was just a joke. Elle's evidence-focused nature wouldn't allow it. He decided to monitor criminal death rates during this period before making a final decision. Soichiro was worried sick. If Light was confirmed as Kira, he, as a father, might act irrationally. At his suggestion, Elle had Soichiro confined as well. Surprisingly, since Light's confinement, no new criminal deaths occurred. This seemed to confirm Light was Kira. Elle wondered if it was really unconscious killing to evade justice as Light claimed. He felt this wasn't Kira's style. He hadn't yet grasped the true depth of Light's plan. After being imprisoned for 7 days, Light relinquished ownership of the notebook. All his memories related to the Death Reaper vanished. Light reverted to the innocent young man he once was, the light returning to his eyes. He now firmly stated he was not Kira and demanded his release. This put Elle in an awkward position. Releasing him now would make Elle look foolish. Besides, the lack of new deaths was a fact. Release was out of the question. However, on the 15th day of his confinement, Kira acted again. Both new criminals and those who had previously escaped death began dying of heart attacks. It was as if Kira had just taken a vacation. But Elle still told Light that since no criminals had died for 2 weeks, he should admit he was Kira. Light acted extremely hurt, insisting he was being framed by Kira. His sincere expression had no effect. Elle still believed Light was Kira, but the facts were undeniable. Other officers began to suspect that Elle was unwilling to admit his deduction was wrong. If Light could kill while confined, he wouldn't have needed to use the FBI as a threat. After more than 50 days of confinement, Elle released the exhausted Soichiro and gave him his final order, to execute Light and Misa himself, with Soichiro acting as their escort. To clear his name, Light had not only proposed his own confinement, but had also relinquished ownership of the notebook, leaving an innocent version of himself to face Elle. Despite his sincerity being his greatest weapon, he never expected Elle to go as far as to have him executed. The memoryless Light was filled with despair. He had always believed he was framed by Kira, yet Elle, whom he thought would help him, had reached this conclusion. No matter how much Light pleaded, his father remained unmoved, taking them to a remote location. Rather than let his child be killed by others, Soichiro decided to do it himself and then commit suicide. A gunshot rang out, but Light was unharmed. Soichiro finally sighed in relief, feeling more exhausted than ever. If his son were truly Kira, that shot would not have been a blank. At that moment, Elle's voice was heard. It was all a test he had arranged. If Light or Misa were Kira, they would have killed Soichiro before being killed themselves. The results seemed to clear them of suspicion, but Elle still didn't let his guard down. He could only surmise that Kira's power had been transferred, and he was right. It turns out before turning himself in, Light had already passed the notebook to someone else. After Misa relinquished her notebook, Rem had threatened Light's life, demanding he save Misa. By then, Light already had a plan. He buried Ryuk's notebook in the ground. The other notebook, relinquished by Misa, he gave to Rem, telling her to find someone who would use it for money or status. The person Rem found was one of the 8 executives of the Yotsuba group. This third Kira revealed the notebook's existence to the other 7 executives. Though they didn't know who Kira was for the sake of the company and personal gain, they willingly became accomplices. At their weekly board meetings, they would decide who to kill, conveniently eliminating corporate rivals. This was why, 15 days into Light's confinement, Kira's activities resumed. The memoryless Light had become a perfect model student. He was currently unaware of the real Kira's full plan. Now he was engaged in a peculiar game with L, chained together 24/7, so he couldn't escape L's sight. This caused some displeasure for Misa, who wondered if their dates would now be a threesome. But for Misa, regaining her freedom was the best possible outcome. The evidence against her as the second Kira was overwhelming. L might have even chained himself to her as well, if not for propriety. To get information about the second Kira from Misa, L bribed her talent agency and had Matsuda assigned as her manager. There was an even simpler method: have Light use his charms, pretending to be intimate with Misa. With her love-struck personality, getting information would be easy, making the investigation more convenient. L even had a 23-story building constructed just for Misa, an almost inhumanly extravagant move. The building not only provided for the investigators' living needs, but also had a much more secure security system. Yet L had become lethargic. He had gone to such great lengths, hoping for a Kira who could challenge him, a Kira like Light. But as things stood, it seemed Light was just being manipulated by Kira, or that Kira's power could be transferred. This meant even if they caught the third Kira, it would be meaningless. An angered Light told L to think about the innocent victims. After a brief scuffle, the well-meaning Matsuda tried to intervene, but was mercilessly called an idiot. 2 months passed. Through his investigation, Light found that several people who died of heart attacks had conveniently caused the Yotsuba group's stock to soar. He deduced that the third Kira was likely connected to Yotsuba, using the guise of punishing criminals to eliminate competitors. The Yotsuba members were actually cautious, usually arranging for their rivals to die in accidents, but some targets couldn't be killed in the specified manner and ended up dying of heart attacks. They never expected Light to uncover them from such a small clue. To evade the police, they had threatened them in Kira's name. If the police continued to investigate Kira, they would target politicians. The police caved again, even ordering the task force to cease its activities. Hearing this, Soichiro immediately chose to resign, determined to continue the fight even as a private citizen. He gave the others a choice. Most chose to resign and continue investigating. Only Aizawa hesitated since he had a wife and child. Unlike Soichiro, who could be reinstated after the case was solved, losing his job could tear his family apart. He even considered helping in his spare time but was flatly rejected by L. From the beginning, Aizawa had been prepared to make sacrifices, but L's attitude solidified his decision to leave. L had actually prepared funds to support his partners, but hadn't mentioned it. He wanted Aizawa to make his choice without that safety net, to test if he could abandon everything and persevere. This was disheartening for Aizawa. He walked out of the headquarters without looking back. Finally having time for his family, he held his daughter and broke down in tears. Some say the duel between L and Light was unfair, but L had his own superpower: wealth. He could build an entire office building on a whim. This was because, in addition to his income as the world's top detective, he was also the second and third greatest detectives. The Yotsuba group, lacking this level of foresight, hired the world's second greatest detective to investigate L, and so the request landed right in L's hands. To solve the manpower shortage and aid the investigation, L brought in 2 helpers, a professional con artist and a master thief. Just as L was cautioning everyone to be careful, he received bad news. Matsuda, trying to prove he wasn't an idiot, had snuck into the Yotsuba group during Misa's film shoot. He overheard the board discussing Kira and their plans to eliminate competitors. Panicked, he was discovered and could only secretly press his emergency contact button to call for help, then claimed to be a manager trying to promote his company's talent. L called Matsuda and, under the guise of inviting him for a drink, figured out his situation. The Yotsuba executives had already decided to kill Matsuda. To prove his identity, Matsuda had to call Misa over. The Yotsuba members, who were just about to commit murder, instantly changed their tune upon seeing Misa. Matsuda took the opportunity to relay what he had heard to L. But to eliminate Yotsuba's suspicion, Matsuda had to die once. Emerging from the restroom, Matsuda gave the performance of his life. Feigning extreme drunkenness, he announced a grand finale, staggered onto the balcony, and accidentally fell off. The Yotsuba executives were stunned. It was all an act. Matsuda was caught by a safety net below. By dying before they could kill him, he was safe. The second greatest detective had also accepted their commission and informed them that their pattern of killing every weekend had been exposed. This was a double victory for Yotsuba. But they didn't know that the master thief had already hacked their security system, and L was watching their every move. Based on the meeting's content, they could have made arrests, but L wanted to wait for Kira to reveal himself. Light and his father strongly opposed this, arguing that waiting would mean more innocent deaths. Inspired by his father, Light thought of a way to have it both ways. Using L's name, he contacted the Yotsuba member who seemed least likely to be Kira, requesting he delay the killings. The executive hesitated, realizing they were under surveillance. Helping would get him killed by Kira. Not helping would lead to his arrest. But Light's next words swayed him. If L was caught, the others could go free. Even if Kira won, he could continue his life of luxury. It was a good deal. The executive agreed. He convinced the others to postpone the killings for a month, citing L's surveillance as the reason. L remarked that this was exactly his style, but Light had reacted even faster. L then asked, out of the blue, if Light would be willing to inherit the name L after he died. This question was a trap. L believed Light had deliberately transferred Kira's power to someone else, planning to regain it after earning trust and clearing his name. If Light agreed to become the next L, he could control the task force's actions and be unbeatable. But Light was too clever, voicing all of L's thoughts aloud. Regardless, the priority was catching the third Kira. After receiving information about Misa from the second detective, the Yotsuba group invited her to be their corporate spokesperson, hoping to get information about L from her. The third Kira, Higuchi, was especially interested. Rem, unable to bear it, tore off a small piece of the notebook and gave it to Misa. Though the scrap was too small to restore Misa's memories, it allowed her to see Rem again. Rem told Misa the truth about her and Light being former Kiras, and to trust Light's plan. Rem also warned her to be careful of the third Kira, but for Misa, she would do anything to help Light. With Rem's help, she learned that Higuchi was the third Kira. Now she had to convey this information to Light in a plausible way. She disguised herself to evade surveillance and went on a date with Higuchi. Misa suddenly claimed to be the second Kira and said her dream was to be Kira's bride. The Sakura TV incident suggested Misa had the Death Reaper eyes, which convinced Higuchi to keep her close. He unhesitatingly admitted to being Kira. To prove her own identity, Misa offered to kill a criminal. She pretended to write something while Rem did the actual killing. Higuchi's notebook was at home, so he couldn't prove his identity. Under Misa's persuasion, he agreed to stop killing criminals for a while to prove himself. He didn't know their entire conversation was being recorded, though Misa selectively deleted the parts where she identified herself. Light and L now plausibly knew the identity of the third Kira, but before arresting Higuchi, L wanted to determine his exact method of killing. At this point, L suddenly asked Light if he remembered killing anyone. Light, though annoyed, truthfully said he didn't. L continued, asking that if they assumed Light was once Kira, was he given the power by some entity who then transferred it, or did Light himself proactively give the power to someone else as part of a plan? Based on the clues, even Light himself would come to this conclusion, let alone L, who had been chasing Kira all along. With Light's confirmation, L became more certain that Kira's power could only be transferred willingly by the user. Based on this, L devised an arrest plan that would prevent Higuchi from transferring the power. First, have a TV station announce that someone knows Kira's identity and have that person appear at the end of the broadcast. This person had to be a threat to Higuchi and someone whose name he could easily find. The rest of the team would monitor Higuchi's every move as he committed the crime and arrest him with concrete evidence. The best bait for this was Matsuda. He was officially dead and he was suspected of eavesdropping. There was one flaw. If Higuchi, like the second Kira, could kill with just a face, Matsuda would surely die. Matsuda was given 2 days to decide if he would participate. Risking his life, Matsuda went on the live broadcast. All they needed was for Higuchi to see the show. Higuchi initially thought it was a publicity stunt. The show then staged a technical difficulty, revealing Matsuda's true face. Higuchi realized the gravity of the situation. He had written Matsuda's name in the notebook before for safety. Now it seemed the man had faked his death and used a fake name. And from his confident demeanor, he seemed to really know Kira's identity. Higuchi had 2 hours to find Matsuda's real name. He didn't know that from this moment on, he was following a script prepared by L. He first thought of calling Misa to use her Death Reaper eyes, but she hung up on him. He then called her agency, but the administrator was on vacation and couldn't access the files. Seeing Higuchi's urgency, the administrator gave him the password to the office door so he could check the files himself. Higuchi rushed to the agency but worried the files might be fake. L and Light were puzzled, as they couldn't see Rem and thought Higuchi was talking to himself. As the one-sided conversation continued, Light realized Higuchi wasn't alone. L speculated that the unseen entity might be the Death Reaper Kira had mentioned. Higuchi burst into the office and started searching. L had already set up cameras, waiting to confirm his killing method, but Higuchi just copied down a name and left. While L and Light were confused, so was Higuchi. 40 seconds after writing the name, Matsuda hadn't died. Higuchi realized he had been tricked by another fake name. L deduced that writing a name was Kira's method of killing, but without clear evidence they couldn't arrest him, and they worried the power would be transferred. As the broadcast deadline approached, Higuchi made a move. He traded half his remaining lifespan to Rem for the Death Reaper eyes. After getting the eyes, Higuchi rushed back to the agency. He was going to use the company's surveillance footage to see Matsuda's face. L immediately sensed the danger. He deduced that the trade had given Higuchi the same ability as the second Kira, to kill with just a face. He instructed his team to proceed with the second Kira protocol while he and Light headed to the scene. Higuchi arrived at the agency only to find the tapes had been tampered with. L had anticipated this and had the master thief alter the footage related to Matsuda. Cornered, Higuchi made a bold decision. He would go to the live broadcast studio to see Matsuda's name for himself. But the studio had been cleared by the police. Inside were only 2 mannequins and investigators in helmets, waiting for him. Higuchi pretended to surrender, then, under the dim lights, pulled out a gun. After wounding one officer, he fled in a panic. L pursued him in a helicopter. When Higuchi saw the police blockade ahead, he finally realized he was trapped. Desperate, he tried to shoot himself, but was stopped by a precise shot from L's trusted associate. Hearing L's voice in his earpiece, Higuchi knew he had been outmatched. He confessed his killing method and the existence of the notebook. Soichiro, who was the first to touch the notebook, initially saw just an ordinary book. But when he turned around, he screamed in terror. He saw Rem, the Death Reaper. After L got the notebook, he too saw the Death Reaper. He immediately connected the Aoyama incident to the notebook, certain there were at least 2. While he was distracted, Light also touched the notebook. Memories flooded back into his mind and he couldn't help but cry out. L, thinking he was scared by the Death Reaper, offered some comfort, but Light quickly returned to normal. Light's plan had been perfect, and he had gone to extreme lengths to win, leading to the iconic just-as-planned moment. Before his voluntary confinement, Light had 2 notebooks, Notebook 1 from Ryuk and Notebook 2 relinquished by Misa. Light performed a series of operations on them. First, he returned Notebook 2 to Rem, had her give it to Ryuk, who then dropped it for Light to find. This seemingly convoluted process changed Notebook 2's corresponding Death Reaper from Rem to Ryuk, making Light its owner and archiving his memories within it. Then, Light returned Notebook 1 to Ryuk and had him give it to Rem. This changed Notebook 1's Death Reaper from Ryuk to Rem. Finally, he had Rem find a new owner for Notebook 1, the unfortunate Higuchi. This was just the first layer. The second layer was Light's voluntary confinement, during which he relinquished ownership of Notebook 2, turning himself into the innocent Light. When the new Kira appeared, L was forced to release him. The third layer was to be executed by the innocent Light. Light predicted that his innocent self would pursue the new Kira out of a sense of justice. In the process, touching either notebook would restore his memories. But there was a problem. Since Higuchi was the current owner, if the notebook left his possession, Light's memories would disappear again. Light was prepared for this. He opened a hidden compartment in his watch containing a scrap of the notebook. He pricked his finger and wrote Higuchi's name. After the longest 40 seconds of his life, Higuchi died of a heart attack. In this way, Light had successfully regained ownership of Notebook 1. After Higuchi's death, Notebook 1 was sealed as police evidence. L immediately began studying its rules. Previously, L had been helpless against Kira because he didn't know the rules. But now, even with the rules, he couldn't find conclusive evidence that Light was Kira. Light had anticipated this. Before relinquishing the notebook, he had Ryuk add 2 fake rules in exchange for apples. One stated that if the notebook was destroyed, everyone who had touched it would die. This was to prevent the police from destroying it. The other stated that if a user didn't write a new name within 13 days of the last, they would die. Light added this to clear his own name, predicting he would be confined for a long time. With this rule, his 50-day confinement would serve as a perfect alibi. Faced with this seemingly absolute rule, L was helpless. He had no choice but to release Light and Misa. But Light's plan was not just about clearing his name. His ultimate goal was to eliminate his rival, L. Light had Misa find the buried notebook too. Since it was originally hers, her memories returned upon touching it, and she saw its corresponding Death Reaper, Ryuk. Inside the notebook was a letter from Light to Misa, instructing her to write L's name. Only after doing so would she be the love of his life. The problem was, although Misa had seen L in his real name before her arrest, she had forgotten it. Without hesitation, she traded half her remaining lifespan for the Death Reaper eyes again. This was the 4th layer of the plan. Light had anticipated Misa would forget L's name, which is why he had switched Notebook 2's Death Reaper to Ryuk, who would have no sympathy for Misa. But Light's plan had a 5th layer. Although Misa was cleared, she had lost access to the headquarters building and couldn't see L. Finding a photo of him was impossible. Even with the Death Reaper eyes, she couldn't see his name. In fact, Light's true trump card was Rem. Seeing Misa's lifespan halved again, Rem felt sympathy for Misa and realized Light's cruel intentions. With only a quarter of her original lifespan left, Misa was at a much higher risk of being arrested and executed. Misa's actions quickly drew the task force's attention. Kira's killings resumed right after her release, which was suspicious enough. L deduced that a piece of the notebook could also be used to kill. Re-examining past cases with this in mind, the possibility of Light being Kira grew stronger. The only sticking point was the 13-day rule. As long as it existed, Light's 50-day confinement cleared him. Heavy rain fell outside the headquarters. The two sought shelter on the steps, drying themselves. L came over to Light and carefully dried his feet. L revealed that to test the 13-day rule, he had requested a death row inmate scheduled for execution in over 13 days to use the notebook. If the rule proved false, everything would connect. They just needed to wait 13 days to prove the rule was fake, and then he could catch the real Kira. But it was too late. To save the innocent Misa, Rem wrote L's name, killing him and ending his story. Seeing the silent, twisted smile on Light's face, L realized his deductions were correct. He showed a rare, faint smile in his final moments. Light's superb acting fooled everyone. He seized Rem's notebook before the police could, and with a grim face vowed to catch Kira to avenge L. After L's death, there was no more Death Note in the truest sense. Light felt a similar sentiment. Without his great rival, he even felt a bit bored. He now held L's position and had become a police officer himself. The only downside was that he didn't inherit L's vast fortune. He unhesitatingly deleted L's investigation files and moved the task force headquarters to a rented apartment. Ryuk also felt bored, lamenting that he would never find such entertainment again. But Light told him this was just the beginning. He was about to witness the birth of a new world. While reminiscing about his cat-and-mouse game with L, Light increased the scale of his punishments, even targeting former allies like Master Thief, the con artist, and the Yotsuba executives. As Kira's judgments expanded, humanity was reminded of its fear of death. Support for Kira grew, and wars decreased. Nations that recognized the new ruler Kira began to emerge, and the world slowly shifted into a dark era ruled by Kira's law. But this didn't affect Light's peaceful family. The scene shifts to Light, now living with Misa. His sister had grown into a beautiful young woman. Even Matsuda couldn't help but call Soichiro father-in-law. But a phone call made Light tense. The director of the National Police Agency had been kidnapped, and the kidnappers were demanding the Death Note in exchange. The notebook in the police agency was the one seized from Higuchi. Besides the task force members, no one else should have known about it. Light felt a sense of unease, unaware that a plan for revenge was brewing against him. The scene flashes back to the time shortly after L's death, when the news reached an orphanage called Wammy's House, which housed gifted children. It turns out L was its most brilliant protege. two others with comparable abilities. They are Mello and Near, who decided to catch Kira in their own ways to compete for the title of L's successor. It's now clear that the kidnapping was Mello's doing. He had become a key member of America's largest mafia family and wanted to obtain all the death notes to become number one. Meanwhile, Near, though he didn't know the notebook's exact location, learned from the police who captured Higuchi that Kira used a death note. He deduced it was likely in the hands of the Japanese police. With this limited information, he compiled extensive data to investigate Kira. Citing Kira's danger, he convinced the U.S. president to form a special investigation team, the SPK, filled with elite FBI and CIA agents, a far more formidable force than L's task force. To stop the notebook exchange, Light chose to have the hostage killed. He regretted not killing all the police officers who knew about the notebook to completely seal the information. As he wondered why the kidnappers had gone silent, he received news that his sister had been kidnapped. The kidnappers demanded that Soichiro come alone to a designated location within 2 days to trade the death note for his daughter's life. Light didn't tell the Japanese police, partly because the kidnappers threatened to kill his sister if he did, and partly so he could blame the director's death on Kira. He told the task force that Kira likely killed the director to prevent the notebook from falling into the wrong hands. Since Kira knew police secrets, it was best not to involve the wider police force. This way, even with the director dead, as long as Light's sister survived, no one would suspect Light. With the exchange set in Los Angeles, Light decided to seek the FBI's help in L's name. But the person who answered was Near. Near immediately revealed L's death and the existence of the SPK. He stated that the kidnapping was related to Kira and offered his help. Light, still trying to process this, was even more confused about how the other party knew Kira had acted. Still, he decided to cooperate, both to rescue his sister quickly and to let the SPK and the kidnappers fight each other. Before Soichiro left for the exchange, Light made thorough preparations. He investigated all the airline staff and even went to the exchange location with Misa beforehand to use her Death Reaper eyes as a precaution. The others traveled in separate groups. Even Aizawa, acting as a bodyguard, cut his signature afro. But even the Great Light didn't anticipate that his father would be taken onto another plane right after arriving at the airport. Mello had predicted Near would use satellite surveillance and took Soichiro to an underground facility in the desert. Light was tempted to kill his sister to stop the exchange, but only the task force knew about the deal. Doing so would implicate him. Soichiro was torn between his duty as a police officer and his love as a father. Seeing his terrified daughter, he chose to comply. To prevent the notebook from being intercepted, Mello even used a missile for transport, making satellite tracking impossible. This series of moves completely stunned Light. Both the mysterious Near and the one step ahead Mello made him feel a humiliation he hadn't felt since facing that man, L. Near was also outmaneuvered. After Mello got the notebook, many SPK members died. Near decided to exchange information with Light, revealing that the kidnapper was likely Mello from Wami's house. Light finally realized his battle with L was not over. Meanwhile, in the bleak Death Reaper realm, a Death Reaper named Sido was searching for his lost notebook, which seemed to have been found by Ryuk and given to Light. Light's eventual failure was inevitable. Even without Near's elaborate plan, he would have been brought down by some minor, unforeseen character. After eliminating his greatest obstacle, Light had become arrogant and lost his humanity, targeting the innocent and even considering killing his sister. This time, he had even manipulated his own father. After learning Mello was from Wami's house, Light investigated and discovered L's two successors. He realized his duel with L hadn't ended. The priority was to find Mello's hideout and retrieve the notebook. He had Misa use her Death Reaper eyes to find the current notebook holder on a wanted list. He wrote the man's name in the notebook, ordering him to mail the Mafia's address to him before dying. Now he just needed a plausible way to leak the address to the police. But all his actions were being watched by Sido. Following the address, Sido found the Mafia. Though it was his first time seeing a Death Reaper, Mello was calmer than most. He won Sido over with a piece of chocolate and learned about the 13-day fake rule. He deduced that Kira might have used this rule. Meanwhile, Light made his own move. He relinquished ownership of his current notebook and had Ryuk deliver it to the Japanese police headquarters. He kept Misa's notebook with him, leaving her only a few pages to continue her punishments. This way, though he wasn't the notebook's owner, he still retained his memories. He then had Misa command the police as Kira, stating that the Mafia's time of death was set and that they should seize the opportunity to capture Mello and retrieve the notebook. This was a gift for the police. With Light's guidance, the police decided to use the notebook and trade for the Death Reaper eyes. Soichiro volunteered for the trade. His personal feelings had led to the notebook falling into criminal hands. This was his chance to atone. Even if he died 13 days later due to the rule, he was willing. They deeply believed in the 13-day rule, meaning Light would have to kill his own father 13 days later. The police staked out the Mafia hideout at the time specified by Kira. The moment Soichiro saw the criminals' lifespans disappear, the police stormed the building. Mello was stunned by how quickly Kira had acted. At this time, Sido had already been restrained by Ryuk. The police easily recovered the death note, but Light insisted they press on and capture Mello. Soichiro found the fleeing Mello and called out his real name, telling him to surrender or be executed. But Soichiro hesitated to write, and a supposedly dead Mafia member shot him. As Mello tried to grab the notebook, police reinforcements arrived, and he escaped by setting off an explosion. Gravely injured, Soichiro struggled to open his eyes and saw his son's lifespan. He had finally confirmed with his own eyes that his son was not Kira. Light cried out for his father not to die. No one knew if the tears in his eyes were from acting or genuine emotion. In the end, Sido got his notebook back. The notebook Light had lent the police was sealed as evidence. Light was now left with only the notebook Misa had given him. His father died in the hospital, and his sister was traumatized by the kidnapping. It seemed to validate Ryuk's saying that no one who uses the death note finds happiness. The only exception was perhaps Soichiro. Because he never truly used the notebook, he died happily, believing his son was innocent. Yet even after all this, Light still believed he could create a happy world, as more and more people supported Kira, and the media widely promoted his ideology. Even the US president gave up resisting Kira. Light was now consumed with how to eliminate Mello and Nier. Nier had already narrowed his focus to the Japanese police. The fact that the police would trust Kira was strange. And why did Kira only choose to help them now, after 5 years of inaction? Crucially, after retrieving the notebook, Kira disappeared again, generously leaving the notebook at the police station. Nier suspected a secret deal between Kira and the Japanese police, and that Kira might even be the current L, though he put the probability at only 7%. Just then, Mello appeared, taking a hostage. Since his real name was known to the Japanese police, Mello came to retrieve the only photo of himself he had left. The SPK members wanted to kill Mello to avenge their colleagues, but Mello was a key piece of Nier's puzzle. Nier not only let Mello go and returned the photo, but also destroyed the related surveillance footage. To repay the debt, Mello told Nier about the Death Reaper and the 13-day fake rule. The two once again began their race to catch Kira. After learning about the fake rule and connecting them with the current L's strange behavior, Nier immediately saw the problem. He called the Japanese task force and, with the call on speaker, informed them of the fake rule. Nier had Light use deduction to figure out which rule was fake. Light could only answer that it was the 13-day rule. Nier then offered to test it himself by writing Mello's name and announcing the result in 13 days, but the others rejected this on humanitarian grounds. Unfazed, Nier bluntly asked if any of them had ever suspected the second L of being Kira, and that anyone who could contact him directly. This successfully sowed doubt. If the 13-day rule was fake, Light's suspicion could not be ruled out. But Soichiro, on his deathbed, had clearly stated he could see Light's lifespan. The team was thrown into confusion. Light finally realized how dangerous this small boy he had overlooked was and decided to eliminate him immediately. He contacted the US president as Kira, threatening his life to force him to release the SPK's information. The president complied, declaring the SPK an evil organization trying to arrest the savior Kira, and mobilized Kira's fanatical supporters to storm the SPK headquarters. Meanwhile, Misa was watching surveillance monitors, waiting for Nier to appear. To escape the siege of Kira's followers, Nier scattered all of L's lifelong savings into the crowd. As the followers scrambled for the money, Nier's team, disguised as police in helmets, escaped through the main gate. Soon after, Nier contacted Light again. He pointed out that the moment he suspected the second L, an attempt was made on his life. If the other investigators were even slightly intelligent, they should also be suspicious of their leader. Nier said he was waiting for their call. The police began to waver. Aizawa, in particular, secretly contacted Nier and told him about the two suspects who were confined for 50 days and later cleared by Soichiro at gunpoint, as well as information about the Death Reaper eyes. However, Aizawa did not explicitly name the confined individuals. But from Soichiro's words about killing Kira and then himself, Nier deduced a father-son relationship and immediately zeroed in on Light. Aizawa later confessed his contact with Nier to Light. He also thoroughly investigated Misa, the former second Kira, but her behavior was completely normal, and there was no trace of a notebook in her home. Just then, a man appeared on TV calling himself Kira's spokesperson. He solicited donations from followers in Kira's name like a cult leader. Light wanted to kill him, but both he and Misa were under surveillance and had no opportunity to use the notebook. However, the man on TV suddenly collapsed, and others on the show also died mysteriously. Aizawa began to doubt again, wondering if there was a new Kira. Light, however, was secretly pleased that his chosen person was a good one. Not long before, the pressure from all sides had made Light realize the danger. He needed to delegate the task of punishing criminals to someone else, someone who understood and completely believed in Kira's ideals. After careful selection, Light had Misa relinquish ownership of her notebook. He then mailed the notebook and several letters to a prosecutor who had a strong sense of justice since childhood, protecting the weak and fighting bullies. But as he grew up, the bullying became more severe. The perpetrators acted with impunity, and the victims did nothing. Even bystanders and his family told him to mind his own business. Then one day, he witnessed the deaths of his bullies and their families in an accident. From that moment, he felt a deep sense of relief that peace had returned to the school. This solidified his belief that evil people must die. To him, Kira was a god. The prosecutor tirelessly defended Kira and was finally recognized by his god, receiving the notebook. He unhesitatingly traded for the Death Reaper eyes. He maintained his extremely regular daily routine, using his time after work to punish criminals. However, he soon realized that the original Kira was unable to act freely. He carefully selected a spokesperson for Kira, hoping to make contact. Light was very satisfied with this follower, noting his intelligence and similar thought process. But when he saw the prosecutor punishing not only criminals but also lazy people, Light felt such judgments were premature. He immediately contacted the spokesperson, Takada. Takada was an excellent news anchor who strongly agreed with Kira's ideology. She was also one of Light's former university girlfriends, whom he had used as a cover. Light proposed to the police that he contact Takada to investigate Kira. The police, knowing they had dated but not wanting to lose this lead, demanded to monitor their conversations. Light not only agreed, but told them to listen carefully. A phone call brought Takada back to reality. She bluntly said Kira had contacted her. On the other end, the prosecutor quickly realized that the person who could arrange a meeting with Takada was no ordinary man and asked to speak with Light. Light calmly took the phone and casually mentioned information only the two of them would know, confirming their identities. This act successfully lowered the police's guard. Light then pretended to be threatened by Kira, demanding all surveillance be removed. The police had to comply. Light then revealed to Takada that he was Kira. With his skilled charm, he once again won her heart. Light had finally found a proxy for Kira and a legitimate reason to contact her. Even if he was under complete surveillance, Kira's judgments would continue. Nier had also arrived in Japan, ready for a final confrontation with Light. Though Nier was certain Light was Kira, he couldn't just kill him. That wasn't L's style. He needed decisive proof. Through the Japanese police's wiretaps, Nier deduced that Light was in contact with the new Kira through Takada. He had one of his agents become Takada's bodyguard for close surveillance. He then investigated everyone Takada had contacted. By watching her interview videos, he quickly noticed the conspicuous prosecutor. Nier had another agent tail the prosecutor, but found his life to be extremely regular, like a typical office worker. But on his way home one day, the prosecutor took out a notebook and wrote something, and a hooligan harassing a girl across the train car collapsed. This confirmed the prosecutor's identity for Nier. They then placed the prosecutor under total surveillance. The prosecutor went to the gym twice a week, which was the agent's only chance to get to the notebook. After confirming there were no cameras, the agent successfully obtained the prosecutor's death note. He carefully compared the names inside with criminal records, confirming it was real. Now, they just needed to replace all the pages after a certain date, based on the prosecutor's one-page-a-day habit. Then they would create a situation that would force him to write everyone's names in the fake notebook. Whoever's name was not on the list would be Kira. However, considering the Death Note could control actions for up to 23 days, Nier waited 23 days to ensure his agent wasn't being manipulated before contacting Light. He claimed to have a lead on Kira and proposed a meeting with the police in 5 days, with everyone from both sides present at a secluded warehouse. Nier was giving Kira a golden opportunity to eliminate all investigators, hoping he would hand over the evidence of his own guilt. Light was overjoyed. He would not miss this chance, but Nier had completely fallen into his trap. After contacting Takada, Light had given the prosecutor instructions. First, the prosecutor was to tear out several pages and mail them to Takada, making her the one carrying out the judgments. Meanwhile, the prosecutor would create a fake notebook and hide the real one in a secure place, only to be used at a critical moment. He would continue to write names in the fake notebook as usual, making it obvious to draw Nier's attention. Light even orchestrated the train incident. The prosecutor was only pretending to write in the fake notebook. The real executioner was Takada. But with this performance, Nier would be convinced that the prosecutor's notebook was real. So, it didn't matter if Nier swapped the notebook later. When everyone gathered, the prosecutor would take out the real notebook and kill everyone except Light. However, an unexpected event occurred. Mello kidnapped Takada, but he didn't know that torn pages from the notebook could still kill. Light had already told Takada his name. The now naked Takada used a hidden piece of the notebook to kill him. Panicked, she called Light for help, but his reply was chilling. He told her to follow the plan and get the list of names from the prosecutor to avoid being discovered as the actual killer. Meanwhile, Light wrote Takada's name in his own notebook, ordering her to set herself on fire and die. This would hide Mello's cause of death before the police arrived. This was a minor setback for Light's plan. Takada was just a more useful tool than Misa. The poor Takada died in the fire, still dreaming of becoming a goddess. The day of the meeting arrived. The Japanese and SPK investigators gathered at the warehouse. If Kira was among them, he wouldn't miss this chance to annihilate them. They just had to wait for that man to arrive. Matsuda was about to rush out and kill him, but Nier calmly stated that the notebook in his hand was a fake. They just had to wait for him to finish writing. Whoever's name was not on it would be the real Kira. At this, Light almost lost his composure. The notebook in the prosecutor's hand was the real one, specially hidden until today. He even generously invited the prosecutor inside to await their victory. As the prosecutor's countdown ended, Light even gave a victory speech. But the story was not over. 40 seconds passed, and everyone was fine. Nier ordered his men to seize the prosecutor's notebook. It contained everyone's name except Light's. Nier ignored the stunned Light and explained. Initially, he had completely fallen for Light's trap, never expecting the prosecutor to have a hidden real notebook. But Mello's actions had alerted him. When Mello heard Nier's plan, he realized the possibility of a fake notebook. He then kidnapped Takada with the resolve to die, just to cut off communication between Light and the prosecutor. The prosecutor, hearing of the kidnapping, made his own judgment. Believing Light was unable to act, he felt he had to eliminate Takada himself. So he went to the bank ahead of schedule, retrieved the real notebook, and wrote Takada's name in it. This unusual action did not escape the agent's notice. After the prosecutor left, the agent broke into the bank safe, stole the real notebook, and, in a single night, created a perfect replica, which he then placed back in the safe. The agent continued to tail the prosecutor right up to the meeting time, confirming he had no chance to inspect the notebook. Faced with this, Light had no room for excuses. He admitted he was Kira, but he argued that Kira had not only reduced crime rates, but also ended wars. He believed it was a mission given to him by heaven, and only he could accomplish it. He tried to make a last desperate move with a scrap of the notebook hidden in his watch. But Matsuda, who had believed in Light all along, fired his gun first. Light became hysterical, like a child who had lost his toy. He helplessly muttered Misa's and Takada's names, but no one was coming to save him. The prosecutor suddenly stabbed himself with a pen, creating a diversion for Light to escape. But where could he go now? Light staggered towards the setting sun. His eyes gradually cleared, like the innocent high school boy who always carried an ordinary notebook. Like the figure he passed by in a fleeting memory. Ryuk silently witnessed his end and wrote Light Yagami in his own notebook. In the final moments of his life, with that familiar blue hue watching over him, Light slowly closed his eyes. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.